Mr. President, I guess if you live long enough and you're around here long enough, you get to hear it all. Hypocrisy is when the party of the rich, now that party that gave $1 trillion in the Trump tax bill to the largest corporations, and most of it going to the wealthiest 1/10 of 1%, now says that they're for the working guy. Amazing. Hypocrisy is when donor states like my state of New Jersey give moocher states, those who actually receive far more than they give to the federal treasury, and say somehow that we should continue to pay more. But that's overwhelmingly the reality that's going on. So I find it pretty ironic that, in fact, the comments of some of my colleagues here, I want to urge the Senate to reject these new IRS rules designed to block efforts by homeowners across America to avoid the Trump tax law's harmful caps on their state and local tax deductions. I want to thank Leader Schumer and Ranking Member Wyden for the opportunity to exercise our authority under the Congressional Review Act to stop these IRS rules from taking effect. 2 years ago, when President Trump and his allies rammed their corporate tax bill through Congress, they promised middle-class families thousands of dollars in tax relief and a $4,000 raise in their salary. Instead, all they got was $1.5 trillion more in debt and an economy that's even more rigged for big corporations and wealthy CEOs. Of course, as bad as the Trump tax bill is for the whole country, it's even worse for states like New Jersey. That's because even after borrowing over $1.5 trillion from China, the president still couldn't pay for his deficit-exploding corporate tax cuts. Where are all my colleagues, all those deficit hawks who talked about exploding deficits and debt? Silent. So what did President Trump do? Even though he couldn't have enough with his $1.5 trillion of borrowing, he dipped into the wallets of New Jersey and other states' middle class by gutting the state and local tax deduction they used to write off their property taxes. In 2016, 1.8 million, or around 40% of New Jersey taxpayers, deducted their property and state income taxes from their federal returns. And that average was about $18,000 per deduction. And more than 80% of those who deducted earned less than $200,000. So to say that the Trump tax law was a giant hit job on New Jersey's middle class is no exaggeration. Already, New Jersey families are paying the price. Earlier this month, new data from ProPublica revealed that because of the new $1,000 cap on property tax deductions, home values in New Jersey have taken a huge hit. In fact, home values in Essex County, New Jersey, declined more than any other county in America. And according to NJ.com, of the 30 counties across the nation suffering the largest dip in home values, 16 of them are in the Garden State. That's why Governor Murphy and New Jersey's legislative leaders took action to protect homeowners from getting hammered. They adopted a program that over 30 other states, and by the way, these states, all these red states, they're not the quote-unquote blue states, wealthy states. These are states that adopted similar provisions before the Trump tax bill that were getting the benefit of a local tax credit for charitable contributions to nonprofits set up by our local governments. They adopted a program that 30-some other states have in the books in some form. In return, taxpayers could receive a property credit worth up to 90% of their contribution. Other states have long used similar charitable contribution programs. For example, in Alabama, there's a 100% tax credit available for contributions to private school scholarship funds. In Missouri, one program incentivizes donations to shelters for survivors of domestic abuse. In Florida, there is programs that actually go to an education fund and to a conservation fund. And I could go through the list of these 32 states that had charity tax credit programs across the country, which now the IRS rules is nullifying what all of those states, many of my Republican colleagues who represent them, are now facing. That what was completely acceptable and the IRS had no problem with now is not acceptable whatsoever. The IRS long respected these programs, so I was hopeful that New Jersey's charitable contribution credits would provide relief to homeowners suffering under the Trump tax scam and would be treated the same as all these 32 other states. Unfortunately, as soon as New Jersey and other states took action, the IRS reversed course and issued new regulations hamstringing this long-accepted type of charitable contribution program. These are harmful regulations for all of the 32 states that are represented through some of these programs, and the Senate has an opportunity to protect all of those 32 states' charitable contribution programs. Look, in an ideal world, New Jersey's charitable contribution credit wouldn't be necessary because Congress would uphold the full state and local tax deduction as a bedrock principle of our tax code. As a matter of fact, it is the oldest deduction in the history of the code. And it's a principle that I would especially expect my Republican colleagues to stand up for. Since the federal income tax creation in 1913, the state and local tax deduction has encouraged states to stand on their own feet. It encourages states to make smart investments that at the end of the day make them less reliant on federal handouts. In New Jersey, we know that when we invest in public schools, we prepare our students to succeed in high-paying fields. In New Jersey, we know that when we invest in mass transit, we connect workers to new jobs and opportunities. In New Jersey, we know that when we invest in public health and law enforcement, we all do better because our streets are safer and our families are healthier. And it's no coincidence that New Jersey is one of the most economically productive states in the nation, to the betterment of all Americans, especially those in less productive states, donor state versus moocher states. Mr. President, isn't that a good thing? Isn't it a state's right to set its own tax policies, a right worth defending? For as long as I can remember, I've heard my Republican colleagues talk about self-reliance, about personal responsibility, about protecting, not punishing success, about states' rights. Well, the Trump tax law was nothing short of a massive tax on the success of states like New Jersey and the state rights of states like New Jersey. Likewise, I've heard Republicans talk about state rights and the virtues of federalism. Well, guess what? The state and local tax deduction is a bedrock of federalism. Today's CRA vote is an opportunity for my colleagues across the aisle to actually stand up for those principles of self-reliance, of state rights, and federalism, to walk the walk instead of just talking the talk, and to preserve the programs of these 32 states with charity tax credit programs that are now all threatened of being extinguished by the IRS's determination. I want to close by sharing a constituent letter I received earlier this year about what the property tax deduction meant to one New Jersey family. This past April, Leah from Bud Lake wrote, quote, "My husband and I just did our taxes today, and for the first time ever, we owe money. And it's not just a little, but hundreds. We own a home, and for the first time, we were not able to itemize our deductions. Our deductions, in fact, were cut in half. There is no incentive to us owning our home anymore. We are an average middle-class family, paying a mortgage and trying to raise 3 kids. I'm tired of our family being collateral damage in yet another political fight." Close quote. Leah is absolutely right. New Jersey families shouldn't have to foot the bill for massive handouts for big corporations. And to add insult to injury, while the new IRS rules crack down on New Jersey's efforts to save families like Leah's money, last fall, the Treasury Department made clear that corporations, listen to this, corporations could continue to benefit from this same exact kind of workaround. Corporations can continue to benefit from the same kind of workaround. How's that for protecting the little guy? How's that for hypocrisy? It's not fair. It's not right. And our constituents deserve better. So we'll continue to push for a long-term solution to this problem. I've introduced the Stop Attacking Local Taxpayers, or SALT Act, to restore the full deductibility of state and local taxes. Under my bill, the more you pay in property and state taxes, the more relief you get. It's the exact opposite of what the Trump tax bill says, which is that the higher the cost of living is in your state, and the more you pay in state and local taxes, the more you owe the federal government come tax time. It's double taxation. It makes no sense. The SALT Act deserves full consideration in the Senate, but in the meantime, we should use the opportunity before us today to help hardworking homeowners suffering from the Trump tax law. We should help these 32 states, overwhelmingly most of them Republican, that have a tax credit program be able to sustain that program for the benefits of the decisions that they made in their states for the purposes they made it, whether it be the education, conservation, or whatever else, that now are nullified by the IRS ruling. Join us, and let's exercise our power that the Congressional Review Act has to do what's right, to protect middle-class families throughout the nation from higher property tax burdens, to protect states in their rights to determine how their taxpayers will ultimately receive the benefit for making investments in education, for making investments in conservation, for making investments in a whole host of issues that these states, in their rightful judgment, decided were perfectly fine, that were always upheld by the IRS and are now nullified by the IRS's decision. That's what we have an opportunity to turn around, and I hope we will. With that, I yield back my time.